Hi and welcome back to Blockbench. I am Kevin, and in this episode we are gonna hyper upgrade this snowman. Let's push the limits of this guy and see how much cooler we can make him now when we do know a bit on how to work our way around Blockbench. I've given you the basics in a few episodes now on how to model, how to texture, and how to put something together from the very basis up. And in this episode we're gonna continue down that line by starting with removing the texture that we had the last time. Now looking at this blob right here. When we are working with 3D, we are essentially trying to understand what something will look like before it's actually given a proper texture, before it has phases, before it has limbs, motions, and whatnot. And that is done by breaking it apart into components we can easily understand. I'm going to move these two blocks up a bit, and I'm also going to hide them in my viewer by clicking on the eyes right here, not the big one at the bottom, but the upper ones. This bigger block, I would now try to make slightly rounder than the last time. And the way to do that would be to try to add a few more extra cubes on the sides. So what I'm going to do is to shrink it in one block back and one block front, one block bottom and one block top. Like that. I'm now going to create a duplicate of this block, size it all the way down to the very top, shrink it in one, shrink it in one. And then duplicate that one as well and bring it down to the bottom. Now I'm going to duplicate the big block again, put it one block forth, shrink it all the way down so it's one block wide, down in, duplicate that and bring it to the back. If you were to look at this now, you can see that this is feeling ever so slightly rounder than the big square, and that's because we have managed to round off the corners. They're no longer pointy. If I could do this one more time, then maybe this one would look even more round. There are two things to think of here, and that is gravity and flow. Gravity on this snowman wouldn't make it so that it's maybe necessarily rounder at the bottom, because it has to stand on something. So I'm going to leave the bottom surface this big and this flat. But the front and the sides, I would like them to be slightly more round. So I'm going to duplicate another face, bring it forth, bring it in two now on each sides, and back and bottom and top as well. And then give a duplication to that. Same thing goes for this big block right here, which you remember from before. Pull it all the way in like that, and then two block in, two block, sorry, like that and like that. Duplicate it and bring it to the other side. If you are in any way, shape or form familiar to Minecraft spheres and building like circles with squares, you also kind of know the math that goes into that, and knowing that by increasing the distance you'll get like a bit of a curve. You can see there's a slight curve here over the angle. This is much more round than what we had initially, right? Now I can continue working with this the very same way for the next two cubes. So let's start by adding back the other cube we had. Now this cube is already slightly smaller than the one that is below, so we can work with this one from the get-go. I'm going to duplicate it, bring it in ever so slightly, shrink it in one on this side, duplicate that, bring it over to this side, and then do the same thing with the big one again. Put it all the way back in so it's one block, as you can see, one block thick, like that. And when I say one block, of course I mean 1 pixel. But I am calculating these cubes as block for myself within this workspace because they are blocks in the space itself. Now we have a slightly rounder version of that. You can grab another copy of this one, shrink it down to 2, and 2. And same thing over here. Right, back, front, do the same thing, not that, but this one. Like so. And duplicate and pull to the back. If you've seen some of the other episodes and you suddenly consider that it's moving way faster, it's because I am now showing you slightly more of my workflow speed compared to before. When working and instructing somebody, you can't go too fast. You kind of have to respect their speed at the given time. And that is what I prefer to do. I've been a teacher in the past, and for me it's important that people are still hanging along. So that's also taking a pause right now to give you some time to catch up. Are you with me on this one? Have you managed to pull all the spaces? It is looking slightly more round. If I look from this side, it's slightly more round like that. Well, that's a cool effect. Whee! Same thing here. Whee! Okay, regardless, can't do that all the day. And now I also know that we need to add a head. Of course, I would like this head to be slightly bigger than that. It's a very small snowman's head. It's almost gimmicky small. Let's make it slightly bigger. Let's make it, yeah, slightly bigger. But on this head, just like on this one, which I didn't do with this cube because I'm considering that this snowball is slightly shoved into the lower one. I would like this one to rest slightly more on the top. So I'm going to add a 1 block thick cube like that, or rectangle or block, whatever you'd call it, depending on who you are and what approach you take to Minecraft. And I'm going to do that. And now you can see that it's just slightly bigger on that one. Yeah, on all sides. Seems like it's completely correct square sized as well. Good, good, good. We can take that by saying size 888. Good. But would I like to have something on the top of my snowman? Usually people add clothing to their snowman. And I would like to do that with this one in one way or another. And I've thought 2 ideas. One idea is to add a hat. The other idea is to add a scarf. If I were to add the scarf, it wouldn't necessarily make too much sense having all of this detail in the middle. If I were to add a hat, I could just build that on top. But I also know that this snowman needs a carrot nose. So we'll get to that in a second. Let's copy this small object and put it on the side of the head. Increase by 1 like this. Duplicate to the other side. Take the same thing here. Do that, because this is going to go on the face now. It has to be well thought of when working with faces, because a face in Minecraft can look weird when you have it sitting on the very angle of something, but we'll work with this for now. And we'll leave the top. Yeah, or no, actually, we'll bring 1 block on the top, so it has a slightly more round approach. As you can see now, this entire model is much rounder than the first snowman we had. I'm gonna add him on screen somewhere around here so you can take a look. It is much rounder, and it already says more with its silhouette, which essentially means the shadow or the shape that the outlines of the model is producing in comparison to the first one we had. This one is more round, essentially. So now I also know that I need to add a nose. So if I were to first locate north is over here. Okay, so this is our front side. On this side is where the face is going to go. So if I want to add the nose, I'll bring something out like this, maybe like that. Shrink it in a bit. Don't want it to be too thick. Yeah, carrot is slightly thicker at the very bottom, and it might be slightly slimmer at the tip. So I'm going to do that. Duplicate. And now I'm going to shrink this one into 1 block. But that doesn't look too cool, does it? Not necessarily. So let's make it 1 smaller. And now, holding shift, I will move this piece in a decrease of a 1/4 of one of these squares in movement in the space. Right, so holding shift, I can now click and drag, and it moves it so it's now centered at the bottom. Centered at the top. Oh, that's kind of cool. Now you can also see that the tapering of this carrot is occurring. That's an interesting effect, and that's the effect that I would go for. It's also the effect that I wanted to have in the beginning. Okay, but there's another thing that I'm thinking of that might be cool to do, and that is, and now we're going to work with the pivot a bit. I'm going to bring out a copy of the carrot root base, bring that one in ever so slightly, pull this one, and pull this one. Now I'm going to go into the pivot tool, and I'm going to center the pivot on this object right here, and then pull it all the way to the back of where that nose was, and then pull it up to the very top corner. Why would I do that? Well, if you've seen any of the episodes, you do know that the pivot tool is essentially a location where we can rotate things around. So if I were to click on rotate right now, you can see that the rotation is occurring around this axis. If I were to rotate, I can rotate both of these ones from this origin point. Why would I do that? Well, I don't consider all carrots to be completely straight. Or, well, depends on, well, yeah. And one cool way to do this could potentially be to make it so that the carrot is leaning somewhat. It's a slightly bendy carrot. I could do the same thing with the pivot in this one. Try to move it in such a way that I can rotate it to point a bit upwards. Now that's a weird carrot. But I guess it works for our situation. I'll just pull it downwards. No, I could do that as well. I'm going to leave the pivot up here though, and then just pull the carrot ever so slightly down. That's a very mopey carrot. Not sure that I would go with that. So this is a secondary point you'll come to when you're working on a model. As in compared to before, when I've been very secure and said, this is how we do this, how we do this, how we do it. Even when you're working with a model, you have to be open to make decisions on the fly. So now I know that that is necessarily not what I want. I can then instead choose to move the pivot point of this front block further ahead down to where that block location is by doing the tools as I said before. And then by selecting these two together, you can see that I can't necessarily rotate them. They have a different idea of where they want to go. But I can rotate this one first and then rotate this one on its behalf and then move it into location. Now I can tell you another tool that you can use, and that is when you hold shift for move. As I said before, it snaps at a different size. If you hold control, it snaps at a 1 point size instead. You can see there on the position up here. It moves 0.1. It moves 0.25, moves 0.1. And that allows me to, with a more precise precision, put this caret bending top somewhere else on the model. So that's the one I'm going to put right there. And it goes like that. There's also a little bit of a texture glitch you should be aware of here, and it's right here. When I scroll out, you can see like how this gray is kind of tuning through and this blue is tuning over. It has to do with the fact that the two faces, the two surfaces, are on top of one another at the very same coordinate. The program doesn't necessarily know exactly which one it's supposed to show first, and thus we'll get this weird blend where it's kind of like spazzing out. One way to get around this is to paint both of these two areas in the same color. Thus, it won't be visible in the game. But another way to work around it is to increase the size of this by a tool called Inflate. That's a tool that I'm not going to use for this video, but it could be nice to know that it's there. So, we have this. Now I'm also thinking that maybe I would like to rotate the very, very root of the caret. And to do that, I'm going to select all of the three caret elements. The one at the very top is this one. It has a pivot. That's not necessarily the best position, so I'm going to put that at the very top of the caret root. Move back into move. And I'm going to add a group. I've selected this block right here that has the pivot here and add a group on top of that. This group is now going to inherit this pivot location like that. So this bone right here is brought up. Is this the cube we're working with? Nope. Is this the cube? This is the cube. Okay, good. If we were to select the bone and pivot, you see that the pivot snap is at this location, even though the cube itself, or the bone itself, is telling us that it's in the center of the model, all of the model spaces. But the pivot is up here at the nose. Then we take the first cube, pull it down below the other cubes, and then we mark all of them by either holding control or clicking one, holding shift and clicking the rest. Or the very bottom, we'll select everything in between. We left click hold and drag on top of that until you see this little icon that gives you a number of how many blocks you're going to add into that bone or this folder. And you pull and drop and they're now in that folder. If I were to select this folder, not the folder alone, but the folders that I have all of these elements selected at the same time by clicking on that folder. If you were to click on one of the bones on the cubes underneath, it will deselect the folder. If you want to click on the folder again, it'll select only the folder. You can't rotate only the folder. It won't make change unless you're an animate. But you can rotate the folder in here. And this can mainly and only be done for Bedrock Edition. If you were to do this for Java Edition, it'll probably squeal a bit. So if I have all of them selected, I can go into rotate. And then rotate the nose slightly further down. Oh, this is a very sad snowman. But it's a fun sad snowman though, because I guess it could be a witch or something when we're done. Okay, let's now add an arm. And I would like to do the arm as the same way as I've done with the bone here. But I would also, now when I have the option to do so, add all of these extra elements into bones. Interesting. So by pulling all of these elements at the top, adding a group around them, I now have, as you can see here by the pivot at the base, a group for the head. So I could rotate this entire piece all at once. Interesting. I'm going to take the bone of the nose and pull in to this group as well. So we're going to rename this group by right-clicking it, click rename, into head. We're going to rename this one into nose. Hope you're with me on this one. If it's going too fast, you can just pause the video and try to figure out how I did. Right-click, rename, right-click, rename. And then by clicking one of these arrows, we shrink the groups. We don't see of the other extra blocks that's in that one. Now we're going to do the same thing with this. We're going to select all of the blocks that are on this part of the body, which is the central part. Okay. Add group around that. We're going to call this mid. And the very bottom then are the rest of the blocks, I would assume. Yeah, Seems very accurate. Okay, add a bound that. That's called base. So we have head, mid, base. It would make sense that, judging by the coordinates, that the head itself is stuck to the mid. So that whenever we move the mid, if we were to move mid, the head follows and the nose follows because the nose is within the head. And the mid then is dragged so that it's added into the base. Now, if we were to move the base, the mid would follow. Make sense? Good. Now I'm also going to add a top of this that is called root. Another file folder that is basically going to be the parent for base, so that the root folder has no loose elements moving about in it. So it's root, base, mid, head, and nose. Now I also know that if I'm going to make arms, they're probably going to be added in the mid section. So let's crack in with getting an arm on this guy. For this, I've decided to move the model slightly to the left, and I'm going to add a folder or a group that I'm going to call left arm. I would like this one to look a bit intimidating, so we're going to see if we can add some cool angles and potentially something else to the model. And now also keep in mind that at this current point in time, we don't necessarily know what the guy is going to look like in the end. We've added textures to it. We kind of just have to work with the shape of it. So I'm going to add a cube to that. The left arm is now going to be moved all the way up where I think the left arm would be fitting in position. And I think that's about right there. Okay, we can see that the cube is following along because we're moving the group. And the cube then would be positioned, let's hold shift. Let's hold shift again, so that's in the center of where the pivot is. Yep, you can see that. You see how the pivot is behind here. If I were to select that one, it's at the very center of that. Yep, good, good, good. Which also means that if I were to rotate the group, it would rotate around the location where it snapped onto the body. Good. So let's size out the arm a bit, like so. Let's duplicate that element. And now let's change the pivot point of this particular element so that that one is set to snap around here. I think that's good. Yeah, I could work with that. What I would like to do as well for this one is to have this to become a proper shoulder limb. Not shoulder limb, but elbow limb, yeah. So I'm gonna add another group that I'm calling elbow, or left elbow even. And the reason why I'm naming these left is because there's a cool thing that Blockbench does when you duplicate something that allows you essentially to work around. And it just renames things that are on the left side to the right side if you copy and flip them. And we'll do that, trust me, because this arm is going to be modeled on the left side, and then I'll show you how to do the rest. So we have that right there. We're going to duplicate another one. And this is where the fun and interesting thing comes. So now I'm going to figure out what I want the hand to look like. And what does a hand look? If you were to look at your hand from the very bottom up, let's take the left hand. You can see how the arm connects onto the outer side of your hand. And then it goes up a bit for the thumb, and it continues to the pointy fingers, right? So this would kind of make sense for the hand, for the snowman, if I wanted to add fingers to it. So let's do that. I'm going to pull out a finger here. And I'm going to pull out like a finger copy here. And then, of course, potentially a thumb as well. That's going to go like here. I think 2 fingers is good enough. But I'm also going to have to move the pivot of the thumb so that it's more in line with where I think it should move from, which would be somewhere around there. Okay. Now I also think that it would be cool to have more motion to the very the fingertips of this guy, and I think that it's good if he's kind of creepy. So I'm going to increase the finger length ever so slightly. I'll have a longer pointer finger for that. And now we have to make bones around this, because trust me, I'm planning on animating this. So we have the hand. We're going to call this one left hand. Like so. We're going to have that cube into there. Now we can double check that the pivot is in the right position. Yep, very correct. And now this is the finger. So left pinky will be that one. And that's that. Yep. We'll select this cube and call it left pointy, because why not? I'll pull that into cube into that one. And this one will be left thumb. Now do note that whenever I wanted to create a new group, I selected the previous element, thus keeping the pivot at the location of that element. Good, because if I were to select this group right now and rotate, it's there. This one, it's there. This one, it's there. Hand, well, yes, of course, we can't leave the pinkies and thumbs and pointies outside of the hand. we need to add them in. So one by one, we're going to drag them into underneath here, like so. Well, come on, you as well. Good. I think it makes more sense to have the thumb at the top, just in hierarchy. Thumb, pointy, pinky. Now I would like to add a tip to each of these three fingers. So I'm going to go with the thumb tip. So we'll duplicate that thumb, move it in so that it's shielded to itself. We'll rename this file to left thumb tip. We're going to do the same thing with the pointy finger. We're going to pull it back into there. We're going to rename it into left pointy tip. And same thing with the pinky. Going to rename it into left pinky tip. Okay, good. Pull it back in. And of course we have to relocate these files so they're in the right spot, like where they're actually going to go. And I think that the pointy for that one is going to be slightly longer. Same thing for this one. And for the thumb, of course, it also has to go out a bit and it's going to be slightly longer. I have no idea if this is going to look cool or not, but I guess it probably will. Maybe probably will. It's a good way to look at things. So let's see here. Pivot there. Yeah, good. Of course, we're going to move the cube. That thumb. Do I want it? Yeah, I want it to be slightly longer. So we're going to do that. We're going to move the tip out one. Good. That's better. Now let's check what happens a bit if we were to select the thumb, rotate it, select the pointy and rotate it slightly, select the pointy tip and rotate it. Does this feel right? Yeah, I'd say that this actually feels a bit like a finger. It lacks one top limb for the fingers, but I think 3 will work all fine. Oh, what happened there, you say? How come I can suddenly see the model like this? Well, when clicking Control Z, I forgot to hold Control, and I just clicked the Z key. The Z key allows me to see the model as this outline and hollow object, which just shows me all of the faces. The Z moves back and forth between that. We have a wireframe and we have a non-wireframe view. Good to know. Glad that I accidentally did it by mistake. Sometimes mistakes are happy accidents. So now we have the left arm here. I'm going to add that left arm into our mid folder. Now, how did I do that with that ease? I clicked on the file folder, held left on the mouse, and scrolled wheel my way around the list. You can't do this in most programs, but you can do it in Blockbench, which is amazing. So good to know. It's in the mid right there. And now as well, I'm going to duplicate this arm and put it on the other side. But it wouldn't be optimal for the textures if I did that, considering I want this arm to use the same textures on both sides. So I'm going to leave this arm out for now, well, the other arm, and we're going to come back to that in the next episode, where I'm going to pull out the textures and try to work out on just some last finishing touches for this model. I might add some more between episodes, but regardless, I hope that you enjoyed this video. Leave a thumbs up if you did. A thumbs up. Yeah, that, I guess. And of course, tell me down in the comments, what else do you want to see? Something more about Blockbench? Anything that you would like me to model out? Do you want me to have the modeling series going, maybe? It would be super fun, probably with some music and some dub, potentially, where I'm just telling you about what I'm doing. But I hope you enjoyed this very long episode of Blockbench modeling, and we're still not done with the snow golem, but we'll get to it. Trust me, it'll be done, probably in the next episode as well. Lovely stuff. But I'll see you there. See ya!